Have you ever been told you weren't good enough? My fiancé's family called me a simple, penniless nobody who was dragging their son down. They did everything they could to ruin our wedding day, a day that was supposed to be the happiest of my life. But when a devastating cyber attack threatened to destroy their entire corporate empire in the middle of our reception, they had no idea the simple nobody they were mocking was the only person in the world who could save them. Little did they know, the quiet woman in the plain white dress had a past they couldn't even begin to comprehend. If you've ever been underestimated, you're going to want to hear this, so stick around. The story of how I saved the people who tried to break me is one for the ages, and trust me, the look on their faces was worth every single insult they ever threw my way. My name is Alara, and this is how my wedding day turned into the ultimate karmic takedown. It all started the moment Leo slipped his grandmother's ring onto my finger. He was a mechanic, the kindest soul I had ever met, a man whose hands, though often smudged with grease, were gentler than any I'd ever known. He saw me, the real me, or at least the me I wanted to be. He knew I came from nothing, that I worked a quiet job as a freelance archivist for a local library, and he didn't care. To him, my quiet nature was a peaceful harbor, not a sign of weakness. His family, however, saw things very differently. The Montgomerys were old money, the kind that dripped with condescension, and was preserved in the icy formaldehyde of their own self-importance. They owned a global logistics corporation, a sprawling empire built on generations of ruthless business deals. When Leo brought me to the family estate for the official engagement announcement, I felt like a lamb being led into a den of perfectly coiffed wolves. His mother, Beatrice, looked me up and down, her lips pursed into a thin, bloodless line. Her eyes, the color of a winter sky, scanned my simple off-the-rack dress with surgical disdain. An archivist, she said, the words tasting like poison in her mouth. How quaint. Does that even pay enough to cover rent in this city? Beside her, Leo's sister, Clara, snickered into her champagne flute. Clara was a carbon copy of her mother, just with fewer wrinkles and more venom. "Oh, mother, be nice," she chimed, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Maybe Leo is just attracted to charity cases. It's so noble of him, really. Leo stiffened beside me, his hand tightening on mine. That's enough, both of you. Alara is the woman I love. You will show her respect, but his words were like pebbles against a fortress. They simply bounced off the wall of Montgomery arrogance. Throughout the evening, I was a ghost at my own celebration. They spoke around me, about me, but never to me. I heard snippets of their conversation, words like unsuitable, no background, and the one that stung the most, disappointingly plain. I tried to hold my head high, to smile and pretend their words didn't cut me. But it was difficult. I had spent years building a quiet life, a life of peace, deliberately shedding the person I used to be. The old me would have dismantled their entire lives with a few keystrokes before the canapés were served. But I wasn't that person anymore. I was Alara, a librarian. I was in love. And I was determined to make this work, for Leo. The wedding planning was the next battlefield. Beatrice and Clara insisted on being involved in every decision, a power play designed to grind me down. Every choice I made was met with a sneer. The rustic barn venue I loved. Utterly common, Beatrice declared. Are you planning on having farm animals as guests? The simple wildflower bouquets I'd picked out. Weeds, Clara scoffed. It looks like you just pulled them from the side of the road, darling. Is that what you're used to? They pushed for their own vision, a gaudy, ostentatious affair at the most expensive hotel in the city, with diamond-encrusted everything and a guest list that looked like a who's who of people I'd never met, and never wanted to. I tried to stand my ground, with Leo's unwavering support, but it was exhausting. Each meeting felt like a strategic ambush. They would corner me when Leo was grabbing coffee, their voices dropping to conspiratorial whispers. You must understand, Alara, Beatrice would begin, placing a cold, manicured hand on my arm. The Montgomery name carries a certain weight. A certain standard. Our son's wedding cannot be a reflection of your humble origins. It would be embarrassing for everyone. I would just nod, my face a placid mask, while inside, a storm was brewing. I knew what they were doing. They weren't just planning a wedding. They were trying to erase me from it, to replace me with a version they could tolerate, a doll they could dress up and display. But the real me, the one beneath the quiet exterior, was watching, listening, and cataloguing every single slight. It's funny, isn't it? How people assume silence is weakness. How they see a calm demeanor, and mistake it for a lack of intelligence. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to deal with people like that, people who judge a book by its very plain, unassuming cover. The true low point came a few weeks before the wedding. Beatrice insisted on a small family dinner to welcome me properly. The welcome I received was a meticulously planned character assassination. They had invited Veronica, Leo's ex-girlfriend. She was everything I wasn't, the daughter of a shipping magnate, dressed in haute couture, with a laugh that sounded like tinkling bells and a smile that was all teeth. She was the woman they had always wanted for their son. Clara made sure I knew it. "Oh, Veronica, darling," she exclaimed, air-kissing her cheeks. "You look absolutely stunning. That dress is divine. It's so wonderful to see someone with real taste again." The dig was aimed directly at me, and it landed with a thud. I was wearing a simple navy dress, the nicest thing I owned, and I suddenly felt like a scullery maid in the presence of a princess. Throughout dinner, they reminisced about old times, about lavish vacations on the family yacht and galas in Monaco, stories from a life I had no part in. Veronica would periodically turn to me and ask a condescending question. "So, Elara, what do you do all day?" "Alphabetize things," she'd ask, her brow furrowed in mock confusion. "It sounds just fascinating," I would offer a small, polite smile. "It's quiet work. I enjoy it," Beatrice would then leap in. "Leo has always been such a high achiever. We worry, you see. It's crucial for a man of his standing to have a partner who can keep up, who can challenge him." The implication was clear. I was an anchor, dragging their brilliant son down into a sea of mediocrity. Leo did his best to defend me, his voice tight with anger. "Elara is the most intelligent person I've ever met. Her life doesn't need your approval," but they were relentless. It was a coordinated attack, a full-court press designed to make me feel so small, so utterly out of place, that I would simply give up and walk away. I sat there, stirring my soup, my mind a million miles away. I was thinking about a different life, a different me. A me who once sat in sterile, windowless rooms, surrounded by screens, tracking the digital footprints of the world's most dangerous people. A me who could find a single vulnerability in an encrypted fortress and bring it crashing down. That Elara would have seen Veronica's condescending smile, and, with a few taps on her phone under the table, rerouted her trust fund to a charity for orphaned llamas. But I buried that impulse. I was here for Leo. I just had to endure. The night of the rehearsal dinner was the final straw. We had compromised on the wedding. It was to be at the Montgomery estate, a place that felt more like a museum than a home, but I was allowed to have my wildflowers and my simple dress. It was a small victory, but one I cherished. I had found the dress in a small vintage shop. It wasn't a designer label, it wasn't covered in jewels, but it was beautiful, elegant, and it felt like me. As I stood talking to Leo's kind old uncle, the only member of the family who had shown me any warmth, Clara approached, a glass of red wine in her hand. She was smiling, but it was a shark smile, all sharp edges and predatory intent. "Elara, I am so sorry," she said, her voice oozing insincerity. "Mother and I have been just awful. It's just, we are so protective of Leo. Can you forgive us?" Before I could respond, she stumbled, her body lurching forward with practiced clumsiness. The entire glass of deep, blood-red wine cascaded down the front of my pristine white dress. A collective gasp went through the room. The wine soaked into the delicate fabric, a violent stain against the pure white. Clara clapped a hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with fake horror. "Oh my goodness. I am so clumsy. Your dress. It's ruined." I looked down at the stain, then up at her triumphant smirk. She expected tears. She expected a scene. She wanted me to break, to finally show the trashy side she was so convinced I was hiding. I did none of those things. I took a deep breath, looked her straight in the eye, and gave her a calm, placid smile. "It's just a dress, Clara," I said, my voice steady. "Accidents happen." I then turned to the caterer, asked for some club soda and salt, and spent the next 10 minutes dabbing at the stain, my composure utterly unshaken. My calmness infuriated her more than any outburst could have. She stared at me, her face contorted in a mask of frustrated rage. She couldn't understand why I wasn't crumbling. She didn't know that I had faced down men who would have her for breakfast. A spoiled brat with a glass of wine was nothing. The wedding day arrived, a beautiful, sun-drenched afternoon. Despite everything, my heart was full of love for Leo. As I walked down the aisle in my now spotless dress, a little trick I knew involving hydrogen peroxide and dish soap worked wonders, I saw the look on his face, and for a moment, the Montgomerys and their petty cruelty melted away. It was just us. The ceremony was perfect. But the reception, held in the grand ballroom of the estate, was where the real drama was set to unfold. This ballroom also served as a high-tech hub for Montgomery logistics, with massive screens usually displaying stock tickers, and shipping routes now showing a slideshow of our photos. Leo's father, a stern, imposing man named Arthur, who had barely spoken 2 words to me, stood up to give his toast. He was halfway through a stilted, corporate-sounding speech about mergers and acquisitions, a thinly veiled metaphor for our marriage, I was sure, when it happened. The screens flickered. The photos of Leo and me vanished, replaced by a single, terrifying image. A grinning crimson skull and crossbones, pulsing ominously. The music cut out. A wave of confused murmurs rippled through the well-heeled guests. Then, text began to scroll across the screens, a chilling message in stark white letters. "Greetings, Montgomery Logistics. Your systems have been encrypted. Your data is ours. Your secrets, your clients, your offshore accounts, everything. You have 1 hour to transfer $50 million in untraceable cryptocurrency. Fail, and it all goes public. The clock is ticking." Panic erupted. Arthur Montgomery's face went from ruddy to ashen white. Beatrice let out a piercing shriek. Clara's phone clattered to the floor. Their entire world, their carefully constructed empire of wealth and power, was crumbling before their very eyes. Arthur was screaming into his phone at his head of IT, a man named Peterson, who was babbling incoherently on the other end. "What do you mean you can't stop it? What do I pay you for? Find them. Fix it." Peterson, a sweaty, terrified man in a rumpled suit, rushed to a terminal set up in the corner of the room. His fingers flew across the keyboard, but his face grew paler with each passing second. "Sir, it's no use," he stammered, his voice cracking. "The encryption is military grade. They've locked us out of everything. We are firewalled from our own servers. I've never seen anything like this." The threat was real. The release of that data wouldn't just mean financial ruin, it would mean public humiliation, lawsuits, and very likely, prison time for Arthur. His empire wasn't just built on ruthless deals, it was built on secrets, and they were about to be laid bare for the world to see. Beatrice was sobbing hysterically, clutching her husband's arm. "Do something, Arthur. Pay them. Pay them whatever they want." Clara, in a moment of sheer, irrational fury, turned on me. Her face was a twisted mask of rage. "This is your fault," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You brought this curse upon us. This never would have happened if Leo had married someone of his own class." I looked at her, then at the despair on Leo's face. He was torn between his love for me and the genuine fear for his family, horrible as they were. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The quiet archivist receded, and the person I used to be stepped forward. The person who lived in shadows and fought battles in the silent, invisible world of code. I took a deep breath, kicked off my simple white heels, and walked purposefully towards the terminal. Peterson looked up at me, his eyes wide with confusion. You can't be here, this is a secure." I didn't let him finish. I gently but firmly pushed him aside. "Get me a direct line to the main server room. I need root access and a system-wide diagnostic." Now my voice was different. It was cold, precise, and held an authority that silenced the room. Peterson, Arthur, Beatrice, Clara, they all stared at me as if I'd grown a second head. "What do you think you're doing?" Beatrice sputtered, her tears momentarily forgotten. I didn't look at her. My eyes were locked on the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I could already see the ghost of the virus, the faint digital trail it had left. It was sophisticated, but it was sloppy in a few key places. "Saving you," I said, my voice flat. And then, I began to type. My hands, which they had only ever seen holding a book or a teacup, became a blur of motion. The room was utterly silent, the only sound the frantic, rhythmic clacking of the keys. Lines of code scrolled across the screen at a dizzying speed. I wasn't just typing, I was dancing. It was a language I knew better than my own. "They used a polymorphic wrapper to hide the initial payload," I muttered, more to myself than anyone else. "Sloppy." They routed their attack through a daisy chain of proxies, ending in a compromised server in Moldova. Predictable, Arthur stepped forward, his face a mixture of disbelief and dawning awe. How do you know this?" "Peterson," I snapped, never taking my eyes off the screen. "Isolate the external network connection. Create a honeypot to divert their attention. I'm going in through the back door they created." Peterson, a man who earned a six-figure salary to protect this company, simply nodded and scrambled to do my bidding, taking orders from the mechanic's bride in her vintage wedding dress. The clock on the hacker's screen ticked down. 30 minutes left. 20. 10. Clara was whispering furiously to her mother. "What is she doing? She's making it worse. She's probably working with them." But no one was listening to her. Every eye was on me. I found their entry point, a tiny vulnerability in the code of a third-party catering software they had installed for the wedding. The irony was so thick I could taste it. They had brought the Trojan horse into their own fortress. With 5 minutes left on the clock, I found the hacker's kill switch, a line of recursive code meant to destroy the data if their demands weren't met. But they'd made a mistake. They'd left a digital fingerprint, a signature in their coding style. I knew it. I'd seen it before, years ago. "Got you," I whispered. My fingers flew in a final, furious burst. I bypassed their encryption key, dismantled their virus from the inside out, and locked them out of the system. Then, for good measure, I reversed the connection, burrowing back through their proxies and planting a little surprise of my own, a tracking beacon that would broadcast their exact physical location to every major international law enforcement agency. With 30 seconds to spare, the red skull vanished. The screens flickered back to life, displaying a photo of Leo and me, smiling and happy, on a beach. The room was plunged into a deafening silence. Peterson stared at his monitor, his jaw hanging open. It's gone," he whispered in disbelief. "The encryption is gone. The system is, it's cleaner than it was before." My God. I have their location. They are in an apartment in Belgrade. Interpol is being notified right now. He looked at me with a reverence usually reserved for deities. Who are you? Every head turned to me. I slowly stood up, my bare feet on the cold marble floor, my simple dress a stark contrast to the chaos I had just quelled. I looked at Arthur Montgomery, a man who had never seen me as anything more than a piece of furniture. My name is Alara, I said, my voice calm and clear. For 6 years, I was a lead operator for the NSA's elite cyber warfare division. I hunted people like this for a living. I left that life because I was tired of the darkness. I wanted something quiet. Something real. I turned my gaze to Beatrice and Clara, who looked like they had been turned to stone. Their faces were pale, their mouths agape in utter, shattering humiliation. The simple nobody they had ridiculed, the charity case they had tried to drive away, had just saved their name, their fortune, their entire legacy, with a skill set they couldn't even comprehend. Arthur was the first to move. He walked towards me slowly, his arrogance stripped away, leaving only a humbled, bewildered old man. I don't know what to say, he stammered. Thank you is not enough. We would have been ruined. I didn't do it for you, I said, my voice softening as I looked across the room at Leo. He was beaming, his eyes shining with a mixture of shock, awe, and an overwhelming love that made my heart ache. He walked over and wrapped his arms around me, holding me tight. I knew you were brilliant, he whispered in my ear. But I never knew this. I leaned into him, finally feeling the exhaustion of the last hour wash over me. I turned back to his family one last time. My price for saving you, I said, my voice ringing with newfound strength, is your respect. You will respect me. You will respect your son's choice. And you will learn to stop judging people for what you think they are and start seeing them for who they truly are. Beatrice and Clara just stared, speechless. Their world had been turned upside down. The power dynamics had irrevocably shifted. I was no longer the meek little archivist. I was the woman who held their future in her hands and had chosen to save it. Without another word, I took Leo's hand. I believe we have a honeymoon to catch, I said with a smile. We walked out of that ballroom, leaving the stunned silence and the wreckage of their prejudice behind us. As the doors closed, I knew we were stepping into a future where no one would ever underestimate me again. So, if you take anything away from my crazy wedding day, let it be this: never, ever judge someone by their appearance. The quietest person in the room might just be the most powerful. Smash that like button if you believe in karma, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. You never know what secrets people are hiding.